Good evening, good afternoon to those of you on the West Coast. Welcome to tonight's program hosted by the Rutgers University Alumni Association and the Rutgers School of Communication and Information. My name is Marty Siederer, Livingston College class of 1977 and Rutgers University Senator, and I'm honored to help host tonight's program, Life as a Journalist, and a conversation with Steve Miller, Life as a Journalist in 2020. I want to give some great thanks to Ashley Kotopitis, Associate Director for Events with the Rutgers University Alumni Relations staff, and Rob Beckles, Assistant Dean for Development with the Rutgers School of Communication and Information. And of course, to Steve Miller, Rutgers College of 1979. Steve's a Professor of Professional Practice and Director of Undergraduate Studies in the Journalism and Media Studies program at the School of Communication and Information. Steve's been married to his wife, Janie, since 1984, and his family has incredible connections to Rutgers. Steve was named the Loyal Son of Rutgers by the Rutgers Alumni Association in 2019. And as they say in those tire commercials, nobody is a bigger advocate for Rutgers than Steve. Those of you who have seen the video, The People's Ivy, I think that exemplifies the passion that Steve has for Rutgers. And if we cross our fingers, say some silent prayers, we're going to try to bring that video up for you. So Ashley, hit it.
In order to just get into Rutgers, you have to be very resilient. We're the ones who work the hardest, but we're also the leaders. The whole story about, you know, we wanted to be orange, but we settled for red because Princeton already was on. No, we're not Princeton's little sister or little brother. We're not the elite, but we're as smart as the elite. We may not be as rich, but we're smarter, we're tougher. Because we have to fight every single day for everything that we get. This is the People's Ivy.
I don't know about you, I get chills seeing that video every time. So it's incredible. Thanks, Ashley, for playing it. And the video reminds me of a conversation I've had with members of the Alumni Relations staff about the unique quality that Rutgers students and staff have, and alumni. It's the grittiness we all have to overcome challenges. And I think Steve exemplifies that. And I think it's something he instills in everybody whose lives he touches on and off campus. So let's get down to a conversation. We're going to lead into the conversation segment, and we'll leave plenty of time for questions. So keep them coming in the chat box. We love seeing those things. So Steve, welcome tonight. The People's Ivy video is just outstanding. What inspired you to put it together?
I didn't put it together.
Okay.
No, what happened was that the Rutgers Department of Media Relations has a video department, a person by the name of Cameron Bowman, who does a lot of videos. I've worked with him before on other things, and he also has taken on a number of our students as interns. And he said, well, we would just want to interview you and ask you some questions about Rutgers. And as every single person who's on here, from Nasreen down to Mary Lynn to Samantha and Amitza know, if you give me a microphone, I'll talk for 80 minutes straight because they're 80-minute class periods. But the People's Ivy came from the idea, former President McCormick used to call us the public ivy. And I thought that was an injustice to say public ivy because we are of the people. Look, Marty, I was one of the highest honors I've gotten was getting named to the Loyal Sons and Daughters. And the only reason I was named to that and selected for that was because the people who are out here typing right now on the chat box are the people who have decided to give up of their time on a Thursday night in September to come and listen to our conversation. It's all because of the students, because everything goes back to the students, and they are the people. And they are the people why we do what we do. It's why Rob and Jody, who are here, are raising money for the university so that these people can get an education. It's why you and I both receive fantastic education, and Ashley too, received fantastic educations at the best university in the world. I'm tired of us we get put down all the time, but people don't understand the most important thing, and this is something I've relayed to them, which was a watchword when you and I were in school, which is, if you can survive Rutgers and the RU screw, you can survive anything in life. But I didn't put together the video. They asked me something and they edited what I said together, but it does summarize everything I feel.
You can just see some of the chat feedback, Steve. That video got me teary-eyed and similar things like that. When we were prepping for this call, you shared your story about how you became a professor and member of the staff at Rutgers. And it wasn't exactly a straight line in your career arc to make that happen. Let's talk about that.
Okay. First of all, as everybody knows, as you said, I'm class of '79 from Rutgers College. My brother came to Rutgers before me. I originally had intended to go into law. And my first year at Rutgers, I lived in Frelinghuysen 433, and I, by the way, lived in Frelinghuysen for 4 years in a row. And I'm sitting in my room, and for those of you who are not of our generation, Marty may have, I'm not sure, when he was at Livingston may have had this, but we did not have wooden desks. We had solid tin desks that if you touched them, they reverberated the metal. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting at my desk. All of a sudden, I hear this whooshing sound coming over my head and something landing on the desk and the desk shaking. And it was a law book. And my brother, and I turned around and looked at the door, and my brother was there, and he said, "You want to be a lawyer? Read this." Within 10 minutes, I was asleep. And I was just out of my mind. I didn't know what to do. Fortunately, I had a professor in the history department, a couple of professors in the history department, who somehow recognized something in me. They said that I should be a teacher. And I actually started out as a TA for a course called Intro to Western Civilization when I was an undergraduate. And they paid me for it, which is completely unethical and immoral to do that, to have an undergraduate grading other undergraduates. So I did that as an undergraduate. I went away for a semester, came back, did half a master's in history. The money ran out. I taught in high schools for a year, got laid off, did another year of part-time jobs, met my future wife. Then it's very funny because I was reminding her of this, that yesterday was the anniversary of me getting a job teaching in another high school. And that's the day I asked my wife to marry her. And she said, "Did you get the job?" And I said, "Will you marry me?" And she said, "But did you get the job?" I said, "Will you marry me?" And she said, "Let me think about it. But did you get the job?" And it was 12 days later, she said yes. That's another story. Anyway, I got laid off there after 6 months. Then I went back to graduate school after getting married. Then I worked at a magazine and did some stringing. And one of the things I did was I videotaped depositions for a law firm in Boston when I went to Boston University. I came back, I taught in a high school for a year. And then they had a big layoff, $1 million layoff, $1 million budget cut. August 1987, my oldest daughter, Rachel, was born, and all my students know about my children because I talk about Rachel and Karen all the time. 3 weeks after she was born, she stopped breathing. They thought she had SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. So they put her on an apnea monitor. Well, since I was unemployed and my wife had a great job, she has an MBA from Wharton, which means she married down. We decided I would stay home with her. So I stayed home with her, and about 6 weeks into it, a woman who was teaching at the School of Communication, then Information and Library Studies, when it was called Skills, named Lainey Struminger, told me that there was an opening to run the audiovisual lab. For those people who have been in Sky/Skills, that was room 120, where the computer people are now. And I went in for the interview with then Associate Dean Siddell Spinner. And she looked at my resume and said, "You know, you're overqualified," because my master's is in educational media and technology with an emphasis in instructional television and computers. I said, "Okay." And she said, talked to me a couple minutes, said, "You're hired." And you said, "You have any questions?" I said, "Yeah, this is the story with my daughter." And she said to me, well, why don't you bring your daughter to work with you? So for the first year I was at Rutgers, I was in room 120. It was lined up with shelves and all these old books and things. And I had my daughter with me. For those of you who had Professor Leah Stewart, who is now again the chair of the communication department, she remembers me, bringing Rachel around, and she gave Rachel a bib that said "Daddy's Little Helper" on it. And Rachel, when she was learning to walk, we bought a big blow-up walker, which looked like the Fisher-Price ring toss things, and we put a bike helmet on her, and she would walk down the hallways in this thing. And I brought her there. So I didn't teach anything that first semester. The second semester, I taught a course in the library school for media specialists. And my students who have taken television reporting remember me telling them the story of one of the stories from the library school, which is, I'm going to ask it out there if you can say on the chat if you remember the 3 or 4 cardinal rules of television reporting. And if you remember, the first one was proper planning prevents poor production. And even then, Mr. and Mrs. Murphy will come for a visit, meaning Murphy's Law. The second one was for every in there's an out and every out there's an in, which means, Marty, you and I remember when you connected all the different things. Like there's an out, there's an in, and so forth. The third one was KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And I'm not calling you stupid. The reason I started saying that in my television class was because when I taught the media specialist course, I said those 3 things, and I said, keep it simple, stupid, and went on. The next day, Dick Budd, who was the founding dean of Skills and Sky, called me into his office and said, we have a couple of complaints about you. I said, why? Said, because there are 2 people in your class said that you called them stupid and embarrassed them in class. And I said, no, I wasn't. And I explained to him. He said, fine, don't worry about it, move on. By the way, for those who remember, the 4th one is you never have enough BRoll. So anyway, so I taught that one course in the spring of '88. My mentor, your friend, my friend, the great Professor Emeritus Roger Cohen, went on leave to New Jersey Network in the fall of 1989. He had been teaching a course called TV, Radio, and Film. For those who aren't old enough to remember TV, radio, and film, TV, radio, and film was later combined with mass media and urban life, or mass media and society, and became 102. He left. They asked me if I wanted to teach. I said, sure. At the same time, somebody who was teaching television production left, and they gave me that. And thus began the journey. I was a PTL, taking up as many courses as they let me have for 4 years. Then they signed me as a 1-year instructor with benefits for 4 years. And then in July 1st of '96, they made me staff. And I was staff from 1996 until August of 2019, when they promoted me to the job I have now, which is Professor of Professional Practice.
That just embodies grittiness, Steve. It just embodies grittiness.
Well, I'm not going to take too much credit in terms of grittiness, Marty, because it also fit into my lifestyle, in the sense that my wife had a great job in New York, originally in New York, and I could, by staying at Rutgers, pick up our 2 daughters at school. I got the better end of the deal. She was, and even in the job that she has after that, and even the job now, she works 12, 13, 14 hours a day. I could leave, and my schedule has allowed me to leave 4 days a week at 2:30 to go at the time to pick them up at school, and then we'll have them do their homework, take them to activities and things like that. So I made out like, it was great.
That's amazing. You see some comments in the chat box. Remember this all so well. It's all coming back to me now. You can never have enough BRoll, absolute words to live by.
Well, Samantha Belmont Olson knows that better than anybody, because she came to Rutgers after having already done videos. I remember her talking about doing video on her own of a skateboarder down under South American home and putting together a production company and going from there. Extreme sports. There you go. Right. So you did that, and then at one point you were in San Diego, and yeah, and you know, Bobby remembers this from when we did television production at, and you'll know that the barracks, where the old OTR, and I worked with Bill Lozon, who taught the other section, and Bobby, by the way, did a video where she was with Laurie Sunshine, and they're doing Cooking with Bobby. So, yes, Bobby, I remember it. Oh no.
Steve, let's talk about your teaching activity. So classes go virtual back in March. What changes did you have to make to your teaching style? And then what have you learned the last couple of months that you've applied for the fall semester?
Well, one, I've learned that I miss being with children and students and these wonderful young people right face to face. We have to teach asynchronously. The preparations that were done by the staff at Sky can't be given enough plaudits. They can't be praised enough. Dean Potter, and I'm not just blowing smoke here, Rob and Jody were in on these meetings. Dean Potter was telling us something was coming as far back as December. And it allowed us to start preparing to at least get our minds in the right place. I'm not saying it wasn't shocking and didn't shake our world. Because literally I was sitting, we had a guest lecture from Naomi Klein, who is the Gloria Steinem chair. And she was talking to my, my large 102 class, AKA TV, radio, and film, for all those who, or mass media society. And I'm sitting in the front row of Scott 123 with her. And all of a sudden I hear her go, uh-oh. And she shows me her computer and says, tomorrow, as of tomorrow, everybody goes home. And we're like, gulp, what do we do now? Fortunately for us, they closed school on the 11th. On the 14th, that Saturday, was the day that spring break started. Unfortunately, I had plans to go to Florida for spring break and go see the Mets at spring training, because I've never been to spring training. I'd been dying, and yeah, that went up. Anyway, so I used that week to transition. Now, now the hardest course to transition was television reporting, because for anybody out there who wasn't in my class, yet we're still doing the same stuff, kids, in television reporting, where it's one commercial, and it's the commercial of your choice, you know, like the WLIE, we lie to bring you the news, that type of stuff. And then it's 2 news packages, which are 90 to 120 seconds long. And for those of you who are old enough or still remember doing it on VHS tape or Super VHS tape or mini DV at Sky in 114B, I still have your tape.
Wow.
So the problem with transitioning that course was nobody had a camera at home. They only had phones. But they also didn't know, a lot of them hadn't really learned how to edit yet. So, and some of them had equipment, some of them hadn't. The biggest problem with teaching online is digital inequity. There are some students who don't have the same capabilities as others. So for example, a student who is in a family of 5 and they only have 1 computer at home, they usually use the lab at Sky or at a general lab at Rutgers. Or somebody who has weak Wi-Fi or no Wi-Fi, or somebody who used to go over to Starbucks can't go to Starbucks with their computer anymore. So that's a big problem. So how was I going to try and teach television reporting that way? Well, I had to change that around. Because of learning management systems, it was much easier to record my lectures as a voiceover, as a narration over PowerPoint, post it on the Canvas or the Sakai website, and have the students watch the lectures then, and then have meetings like this. And that's how we did it. The biggest lesson I've learned is that students crave this synchronous type of teaching. Even now, we're less than 2 weeks into the semester, and I have people already complaining that we aren't meeting enough. but we've been told by the university because of digital inequity and some other things. So for example, the first email I got this semester, which started, and the semester started on Tuesday, was from a student in China who was taking the big course and saying, do you really have to schedule it for 1 o'clock your time because it's 3 a.m. here? So, you know, it's all, you know, there's a lot of stuff, and it's a learning process as we go along. And by the way, Jerry Amenti is live and well and living on top of his mountain in Virginia. So he's doing very well out there, and we all miss him.
And that's referencing what you're seeing on the chat. Jerry Amenti was head of the Livingston journalism program, which is where I happen to graduate.
And the founder of the modern journalism and media studies department.
Incredible person. Steve, let's the topic of tonight's program is to talk about what's the work life for a journalist in the year 2020. You know, what those of us who go way back see movies like All the President's Men, The Front Page, and you know, people are working in newsrooms. Obviously, it's a lot different scenario right now.
It is, and you know, there are people who are on this, who are here tonight, who can tell you from the front lines what's going on out there. Jennifer Amato, who has been covering local news for, I'll say the North Brunswick, South Brunswick Sentinel, and a number of other papers for at least, I'll say it's a decade now, Jen. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Is out there every day on the front lines, and she can tell you what's happening in terms of local news. Not just the events, but I'll say the breakaway from local news and the funding of it. The biggest question I get from potential students and their families is, why should I let my daughter, my son, become a journalism major? There aren't any jobs in there. It's a dying profession. I say, no, it's not a dying profession. What it is it's going through a very long transitional phase. As you can see what's going on now in the various modes of information dissemination, there's a lot going on for somebody to do, and a lot going on for young people to go into the field. You could be like Jen and work in that sort of situation. Jessica Durando, who told me she was going to try and come here, started out at USA Today, and now she's at CNN. Mitra Kalita, who is now a vice president at CNN, at one point was managing editor of the LA Times. So people are just like in the old days, because what people forget is that Walter Cronkite was a newspaper man before he became the most trusted man in America and an anchor. It's just that the mode of dissemination that's popular in the group where most of our advertisers are trying to sell, which is the 14 to 25-year-olds, is digital. And to me, the biggest problem isn't that journalism's dying, it's that journalism is happening in 280 characters. And people are looking at tweets as news. You and I were talking about this, Marty. Professor John Pavlik has a theory about the complete transformation of news, that in the old days it was authoritative and top-down. Walter and the Cronkite and the Nightly News and the New York Times and the Washington Post would tell us what our news was. So it was top-down, it was very linear and so on. But now with citizen journalism, with Twitter, with all these other modes of dissemination, it's now bottom up, and it's become more egalitarian. The problem with that is, who's the authority on that when, as we've seen, somebody tweets out something, and this is not a political statement for those who think it might be, but somebody who tweets out something, could be your grandmother down the street, and people will think it's news, and they'll take it as that, and they'll run with it, but it might not be. And that's where I think the part of that's missing. But I'm sorry, go on. You were going to ask a question. Okay.
Steve, actually, what you just said segues nicely into a question that Heather Hardwick just typed in. We've all seen the convergence of news reporting and brand content and infotainment. What are your thoughts on upcoming trends and the impact of new technologies in news media and journalism?
Okay, that's a good one, Heather. Thank you so much. First, I'm going to start off with, I talk sometimes in Whitman samplers and platitudes. When I used to coach softball, I used to say things, never let your arms do the work of your legs, and I'd give the sayings. I have students, and I'm going to get back into the convergence and things like that in a minute, Heather. I have students who will say to me, because I run the internship program for the department, I succeeded Roger in that. And I'll have students say, oh, there's an internship at Fox News or MSNBC, and I wouldn't work there if you paid me. Why? I don't agree with them. And I'll say, what do you think you're doing? You know, you're not going to be running the network. And I tell them the following, which is, it's not about the red, it's not about the blue, it's all about the green. And that's what it all comes down to at this point. How can media outlets, in whatever shape or form, stay alive long enough for them to make it and become, if not profitable, at least break even so they can survive? When you and I'll go all the way into the early 2000s, there used to be family-owned businesses, newspapers. Newspapers used to be family-owned businesses. Bobby's on here, Bobby Harley Holland. Bobby started out working at the Morristown Daily Record. I think they're owned now by Gannett or North Jersey Group or something, but it's an out-of-town owner. Here in Central Jersey, the Home News, the Courier News, and the Asbury Park Press are all owned by Gannett. Gannett is not based in East Brunswick, New Brunswick, Bridgewater, or Asbury Park. It's based in Virginia. And if they don't make their bottom line, they're going to get closed. I mean, we've seen that with all the newspapers all the time. And what's happened over the years, and this again goes back to Heather's question, which, you know, somewhere in here, let me find, I want to get the exact question again.
What are your thoughts on upcoming trends, the impact of new technologies in news media and journalism?
A lot of this goes back, it actually does go back to the 1980s, where the Reagan administration, and those of you who are in my 102 class have to remember this, the Reagan administration took off all regulations and they deregulated the media industry. And when they did that, it started off what I call the merger mania madness of the time that continues to this day, where you have few owners owning everything. So now I'm going to date most of the people who are on here, but not you, Marty, because when I'm going to ask you a question. When you were in high school, do you remember studying about trusts and something called interlocking directorates?
Not at all.
Okay. And back when they went through the interlocking directorates, back in the era of the trusts that was broken off by Kennesaw Mountain Landis, first commissioner of baseball, threw that in. They had antitrust. They banned something in the antitrust laws called interlocking directorates, which meant that if you were on the board of Coke, you couldn't be on the board of Pepsi. Well, might as well throw that all out the window under deregulation, because now you have the people with Disney partnering with the people at 21st Century Fox partnering with the people at Viacom on all these different things, and you have very few owners owning everything. This has helped Convergence in a way, but it also has taken all the dollars and piled them up under very few houses. And when you do that, it creates almost a feeding frenzy down below. In a way, it reminds me of Game of Thrones a bit, where you have the houses and who's going to battle for the different houses in there. But what it really comes down to is there are, something my father once used as an image, which is there are 8 people sitting around the table and there are only 7 biscuits and you're all starving. And who's going to be left out? It's the convergence. It's wonderful to have all these tools, and this is the other part that's a problem. And then I'll get to the part about the future, because in the future it's going to get more and more, unless a government or our elected representatives decide that they're going to re-regulate things. It's going to get more and more like that, and more convergence. but it's important for people to understand that they are the ones who make the decisions, because if they stop buying something, then the companies aren't going to support it. And I lost my train of thought because I was looking at Sandra. That biggest threat to journalism is Facebook and Google, and have been catastrophic in funding investigative journalism than Twitter. Would you agree or disagree? I think the biggest threat to journalism isn't just Google, and that was where I was going. The biggest threat to journalism is media literacy. People aren't literate enough and don't pay attention enough to what's going on there to try and recognize what's going on. So, for example, today it was very interesting. One of my high school classmates posted something having to do with the election, and it was that the Russians were involved with this, that, and the other thing. And somebody said, that's from a Russian bot. They're trying to infiltrate. I can see that. And if you read the post closely, what this person was sharing, you could see it may be something of that ilk. Google and Facebook and it's not just those two, and Twitter, it's all these big organizations that are involved in this, that any media organization has to perform due diligence. They have to have an ombudsman. They have to have somebody who's really acting as a bouncer, checking people at the door. Right now, for all I know, we could be Zoom bombed. In fact, my daughter, a real quick story. My daughter coaches her high school's speech and debate team. And these high school kids were in a national tournament online in June. And in the middle of this tournament that was sponsored by the University of Kentucky, one of the students at the University of Kentucky burst into it and started shouting racial epithets at one of the students who was competing. And but because it was in-house, they were able to trace the student down. The student who was supposed to graduate was kicked out of school. But you have to have that type of thing, that sort of supervision go on there. But you also have to be wary enough and do your legwork. Just like a journalist, if you're going to be following certain sites, what can be trusted, what can't, what's reputable, what's not.
Steve, I have two questions. One came in on the Q&A box, another via chat. So Flory asked, what's the most effective strategy to get to the bottom of a story? And then I'll lead into one that Larry Kling asked in the Q&A.
Okay, we'll start with that. Thank you that's a great question. Hard work and good shoe leather journalism. I'm going to start, and this is going to sound like a criticism of students today, but it's not meant to be that way. But this also goes back to the technology and what's happened in our world, in this journalistic world. And that is, too many of our students don't know how to write without opinion. This is the generation of the bloggers. This is the generation of I'm going to just post my opinion and put it out there. And that's not what good journalism is about. It's also the generation where people are letting the technology think for them. That they don't go out, they just think that, okay, fine, I can go on Wikipedia and get the answer and that'll be fine. No, you have to go out and go, now it's harder because of the pandemic. You can't just go and see somebody in person, but you have to call somebody on the phone. You have to talk to them in person, on Zoom, or in some way, shape, or form. Too many journalists and too many of my students who are just learning how to do this will write questions out and email them. That's not the way to do it, because how do you know that I'm answering it? It could be my dog Bailey answering the question, or it could be my PR agent, or it could be, somebody who hates your guts and whatever. That's what you have to do to get to the bottom. You actually have to go to a library. Don't just rely on the internet. If there's if there's something that's happening in Morristown or Moorestown, or in East Hanover or East Windsor, you may have to go to the library in any of those towns if the story's there to do some research, because that's the only place the research is going to be. You can't be lazy and just sit in your chair like like this right now. You have to go through the old records, go through everything. I'm sure, Marty, when you were a journalism major, Jerry O'Menti and all the people who were at Livingston College didn't accept you just saying, oh, you know, I did an interview, that's fine. No, before your interview, you did your research. That's what it comes down to. Good, hard work, hard-nosed journalism. And the other thing is, and this is a lesson that our students learn in all of our classes, is it's never done. As we can see with all the stories that are in the news now that just seem to be piling up on each other, one after another, and then new information comes out, you can, you know, come out and do that. You know, you can get more information. My theory about writing, I have two theories of writing. One is called the string theory, which is that when you write, you have what you say in paragraph 1 has to agree with what's in paragraph 8, and it has to have the same idea all the way through. The other is the hub theory, which is if the hub is the center of the wheel, that from that one story, any one story, out on the spokes of the wheel, you can get at least 10 or 20 other stories if you're a good journalist. And that's what you have to look at. But focus in there. Have a thesis statement. Know what your nut graph is.
And to segue, you have a question from Larry Kling. Are journalists less revered or less understood today than, say, 30 years ago? And what can and should they do about that?
That's a great question. The first part of that is, I think they're less respected, but there's less justification to have less respect for them. I think part of the problem with that is that there are too many outlets now, and there are too many methods and too many ways of disseminating information that can undercut. In the old days, prior to the internet and everything else that was going on out there, if you had a TV show, for example, or a newscaster who you didn't agree with, somebody had to sit down, write or type a letter, put it into an envelope, put a stamp on it, and maybe, just maybe, it would reach CBS, ABC, the New York Times, or whatever, or you sent a letter to the editor. Today, somebody tweets, they jump. And the instantaneous reaction that the bosses of, you know, the editors, the news directors, the presidents of NBC News, whatever, have is a result of that. Everybody wants instant gratification, and you're not going to get it. Everybody and because also in the past 15, 20 years, our news has become so polarized, you're not going to satisfy as many people as you did before. It's also because information isn't just around the corner for people around the corner. You know, this Zoomcast, for example, can be seen by somebody who is in London, who is in Beijing. And that's, you know, you have all that going on too. Less respected, and what's the other one? Sorry.
Are less revered or less understood today than 30 years ago?
But it's also less understood because there is so much opinion being put on this, going back to the blogging, on journalism, and that people are expressing their opinion. It will weigh things down. It's sort of like going, you know, up against the bully in high school in a way. You know, where, you know, you keep fighting against the bully and letting the person beat you down, or that person, you know, I think you're ugly, and you know, says to you, oh, I think you're ugly, and, you know, I think your clothes are terrible too. You know, and then you keep going back day after day, getting the same feedback. Journalism finally needs, what they really need to do is reestablish itself as what it's really there for, which is it's public journalism. You're serving a purpose. You're not there. If I'm a journalist, unless I'm writing a specific op-ed piece, I'm reporting the news. What people are getting tired of is opinion. But one thing, I'm going to back up, and some people know this story, some people don't. A lot of people don't understand that MSNBC, Fox, and CNN has gotten there at nighttime, don't have news programs. They have news analysis programs. And I told you this story that Bill O'Reilly screwed me 17 years ago on The Factor, and I didn't even know it, because I had given an interview saying that the problem isn't you know, that it's fine having Fox News Channel because freedom of speech, blah, blah, blah. But the problem with, you know, shows like The Factor aren't a show. It's that people don't understand the difference between editorializing and what real news reporting is. And O'Reilly wanted, short version, O'Reilly wanted me to come on the show and I couldn't go on. Then they asked me again and I said, well, I can't go on, but if I would ever go on, I'd been interviewed about the state of journalism. And that was the subject. If I would ever go on, I would talk about the state of journalism, but not about O'Reilly, Fox, or anything else, because all you're doing is advertising for yourself. About a week later, some alums wrote me back and said that O'Reilly had ripped me a new one on the air.
Wow.
So I told a friend of ours who's an O'Reilly fan about this, and he said, well, and quote, if you have any cojones, you'll wait until the Super Bowl party to watch the tape, because I was getting a copy of a tape. So I did. I don't know why, but I did. Put the tape in, and the tape started out with O'Reilly saying, you know, we at The Factor consider ourselves a news analysis program. But people like Professor Steve Miller at Rutgers don't agree with it. And by the way, everybody, if you ever get quoted and they put ellipses after your quote, they played with your quote. And then he said, and the chair of the journalism department at Lehigh says we're nothing more than entertainers. And they zoomed in this close on O'Reilly and said, gentlemen, I'll put my resume up against yours anytime you want. Zoom out, over his shoulder, graphic, liberal professors. And they interviewed all these people who distorted what I had said, and O'Reilly called me chicken and yellow and blah, 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 blah. So, you know, even he said he was a news analysis program. So what real news, and in fact, people I think right now are craving real news. And, you know, the people who are out there who have gone through our program know what real news is. But too many people out there don't anymore. And I think if there could be a cable station that presents real news and a newspaper that just went straight news, and then and it's a pipe dream at this point, probably. But if they designated what is opinion and what is news, I think people would be more informed. We'd have a better, a more media literate society, and maybe more people would participate more in the electoral process. Side note, message to all of you, from Garrett Stepien to Jacqueline Gray to all of you. If you're not registered to vote, wherever you are, register to vote. Whether you're in the Hotel California, whether you're in Texas, whether you're in New Jersey, vote, vote, vote. I'm not telling you which way to vote, but vote. Be part of the process. Okay, that was my advertisement. In addition to contribute to the Sean Carr Memorial Fund. Go on. Okay. Jim, I'm sorry, can you write that again? How abolition the cable channel newsy? I'm sorry, it didn't come in all the way. Anyway, go on, Marty. We'll wait for Jim to write.
Meantime, I think the way you just gave the shout outs to everybody on the call, you're really a one-man LinkedIn network before that even became a thing. And I mean, you've just been one of the best I've seen at having lifetime connections with your students. And I think you said something during our prep call about that students should never consider their time at Rutgers over once they receive the diploma.
Just because you got a diploma doesn't mean the door is ever closed. I've said that to almost everybody who's come through. Rutgers is a lifelong commitment. And I'm not just saying that because I went here as an undergraduate. I did a year and a half as a graduate student. And I can't believe it, I'm going to say this. This is my 34th year back at the university. But it is a place that you have to stay connected to. Too many people, and I was one of these people, by the way. May of 1979, I loaded up my car and drove away swearing I'd never come back to campus again. But at one point, my wife remembers me saying I was out of the job during that middle year, and I was just doing small jobs. And she said, "What if same thing? A question I gave." And by the way, All right, everybody remember this question. If I were God in her infinite wisdom and I could go, poof, you can have any job, any dream job, nobody's standing in your way, nobody's saying you can do it. As of 7:49 p.m. Microsoft time, because they, Apple, Droid, and Amazon rule the world, what is your dream career? As of that right now at this time, and it's going to change 100 times. And she asked me that question, and I said, if I could ever teach at Rutgers, I'd be happier than a clam. And she reminds me of that all the time. And guess what? Somehow, some way it happened. But our alums, the journalism and media studies alums, the journalism and mass media alums are the best alums at Rutgers. I don't care. I'll fight somebody to finish about that. And I'm a history grad, because they are the ones who take care of each other. I had one semester, a spring semester 3 years ago, where 6 alums hired 6 graduates. Garrett Stepien, hi Garrett, how are you, is on this call. Garrett now works for Sam Hellman. Sam Hellman, class of 2011, who is one of our people. Sam had worked for an alum. The people at NBC know Jessica Grotis-Cordali. She has hired Olivia on there, and so on and so on. It's those people who are old enough, like you and I are, Marty, you and me. Remember the Harvard Old Boys Network. Yes, yeah, Harvard 47, I'm Harvard 49, of course I'm going to help y'all. Yes, how are you? How's Murphy? Great, okay, fine. Well, we are the Rutgers Old Person Journalism Network. Our alums bend over backwards to help our students. Example, Jessica Grotis-Cordali, interned at NBC, got a job at NBC, is now a vice president, a senior vice president. Over the years, she has hired, I can't tell you how many people for internships, and then helped them along like that. Amitza interned with her in 2009. Julia Nutter did at the same time. Go on and on and on and on. And by the way, there was one point, Marty, where if you went to, correct me, it was the 3rd floor of Amitza. On the 3rd floor, it was Amitza and the intern with Jessica, with Natalie Morales, and with Isabel Flores, who was working for Al Roker. They were all right on the same floor. And I was walking out from there, and I ran into Laura Mailer Olson, who's one of our grads, and on and on and on and on. But that's because we put one person there, and they bend, and our alums bend over backwards. And they're always coming back and giving back and talking to our classes. And they're always reaching out to take them on as interns and train them the way that they were trained. It's that, I keep telling people, it's like the circle of life, Hakuna Matata. And yeah, go on.
No, I was, I think definitely, you're so proud of your students. One of the things I love when you post on Facebook to say that you're going to be in New York tomorrow, anybody want to meet with me, and bing, 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 bing. But you had shared the story when we chatted about Sean Carr and the fundraising drive you've set up in his honor.
Oh, Sean was one of my earliest students, and he was one of a kind person. In addition to being in class and just being a great person, he also was the editor-in-chief for Greenprint, which was, for those who don't know, was the Cook College newspaper. He was a university senator. He was very involved on campus. He and Tim Sullivan were freaking frack. They were just disrupting things and getting involved in things, but they were involved in journalism, and that's what they wanted to do. Sean passed away suddenly at the age of 42. I'm going to say it's 6 years ago now, during hernia surgery. And Sean was so beloved that right afterward, Tim, Jennifer Balco, who I'm assuming this is being recorded, who wants to see this recording, who is now living in Barcelona. Sean's widow, Nicole, and I decided we were going to raise money to start a scholarship fund in Sean's name. And everybody responded so well. We were told we had to raise $50,000. We raised more than that. And the money goes approximately $2,000 to $3,000 a year goes to a deserving journalism student who meets the criteria for that. And it's just amazing what this has done for those students. One of the things that's also great about our alums, and not just the ones who are here, but the alums over the years who have created scholarship funds, and people who aren't alums. We have, if you can believe it, I don't know if you know this, Marty, we have a scholarship that pays full freight, full tuition for a year for a deserving student that was left to us by Flip Wilson.
Wow.
He left it to 5 universities, and the reason he did it to Rutgers was because he was from Jersey City. And so we have all these scholarship funds. We have the Art Weissman Scholarship Fund named for one of our alums who passed away suddenly also, that goes to people who want to do broadcast journalism, or excuse me, goes to do hands-on journalism, and on and on and on. And scholarships are really helpful to our students. And we also, one other thing, we started something a number of years ago that we have to pick up again, is an intern support fund. We don't need it this semester because nobody's traveling to internships, but it costs a hell of a lot of money to take the train from New Brunswick to New York. I think it's up to $30 a pop. So, but our alums answer the call. Our alums are our life source. These people who are here, the people who are on this and are sticking with this are just magnificent.
And we'll give that information about how you can give to the Sean Carr Fund at the conclusion of today's webcast, and also in a follow-up email. Steve, 2 more questions, and then we'll close things out. So everybody talks about the Big Ten conferences impact with Rutgers joining on the athletics. But what about how it's impacted academics and the journalism program?
It has impacted everything at the university. Right now, and I believe Garrett took the course. Garrett, you took Critical Issues in Sports Media, correct? Type in yes or no. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Garrett, who, as you can see, got his job and covered Ohio State for a couple of years. Our course is now part of the Big Ten Alliance, Academic Alliance course share program. I have students from Maryland and Illinois taking the course online with me this semester. That's because of the Big Ten Academic Alliance. I'm a sports junkie. I live and breathe the Mets. My brother, who is a Rutgers grad class of 75, law school class of 78. And I wonder what we did wrong sometime, because we're Rutgers sports fans, Mets fans, Jets fans. So it's just goes from there. But everybody thinks the Big Ten with 14 teams. As journalists, we appreciate the ability not to do math, not to be able to do math. Is more than that. When we signed up, it was called the CIC, the Consortium of Independent, whatever, I forget what it's called, which is now called the big BTAA. And it's all the Big Ten schools plus University of Chicago and I believe Notre Dame, who are involved in partnerships for educational purposes. All the cancer institutes on all the campuses are working together. Universities departments work together. When we first joined in 2014, university, the BTAA had just saved all the member universities a sum total of $6 million with a partnership that they presented to Google. So it's about more than just sports. It's about the overall college experience. And that's a really important thing to understand that really doesn't get enough play out there. The other thing, by the way, I'll just give a shout out to the athletic department that people don't talk about is Rutgers, and really more to the students who play sports, has been top 10 in GPA of all D1 universities in the country for over a decade, and twice finished first in the country.
And I think the last one from me, Steve, and I think we've covered all the questions in the chat boxes. Since you're on campus, live close to campus, what's the question you're asked most from alumni about campus?
Well, it depends on who's asking. Somebody, I once got a call from Telefund, which is the fundraising arm of the university, and they said, "Oh, please give, please give. When was the last time you were on campus?" I said, 10 minutes ago. Bye, click. I said, "This is enough that you have my blood." Blah. But the thing that you have to do is, if you haven't been to campus, and some of you haven't in a number of years, you won't recognize a lot of it. The grease trucks, unfortunately, are no longer where the grease trucks were. That's been replaced by the Yard, which has the only two bigger TV screens I've ever seen are in AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, Jerry World for the Cowboys, and the new SoFi Stadium in LA. This thing is huge. And what was left of the grease trucks, the Are You Hungry, is now a storefront in there. But also, if you go by the train station, you won't recognize it. Seminary Place is a completely different place now. There's the two new academic buildings are there, the Honors College. Mostly they're asking me what's changed about campus. What hasn't changed is the indomitable spirit of our students. We're still predominantly, we have more and more people who are coming in for internationally. We have more and more people coming in from out of state, but we're still New Jersey school. And we still have that New Jersey spirit, and that's New Jersey toughness. It's funny. Governor Cuomo in New York keeps saying, well, we're New York tough. New York has nothing on Jersey. We're the toughest SOBs that ever walked the face of the earth because we have to go through so much. And now you add to it the fact that people don't think of us as being that good. Well, we're the best damn state in the country. Right now I'm in North Brunswick, and literally I can walk 2 blocks, I'm in farmland. I can go 30 minutes and I'm in the 20 minutes I'm in the mountains. I can go 50 minutes, I'm at the shore. It's not the beach, it's the shore. I'm an hour from New York, I'm an hour from Philly. What else do you want in life? And I get all the sports teams. And I have the privilege of working with the best people in the world, and that's the students, and the people who are from Jersey. The people who are from North Brunswick, or where I live, or the people from Roselle, where I grew up, or the people from from High Point to Cape May. Jersey's great, and we are I'll go back to the beginning. Yeah, I call us the People's Ivy, but we're the uncrowned jewel of this state. It's not Princeton with their 3,000 people, and it's not those other places. It's us. We're in the center of the state because we're the heart of the state. We're it. This is, I don't understand why our own high schools in the state don't promote us better and don't tell their students that, this is right here. And not only that, I don't know if anybody is on here is in Washington, D.C. right now, but I know that GW costs $75,000 a year. I mean, are you kidding me? When you can get 3 times the education here for, 1/3 the cost. I mean, it's an amazing place. And you can tell that by the amazing students that we have and the amazing faculty who are prize winners, who are great in their own right. And I mean, anyway, I'll ramble on forever about it. But to paraphrase a character from Saturday Night Live, Rutgers has been very, very good to me and to all the people who are out there now.
Amen.
Josephine Bathan,
Yeah.
who by the way, who worked at NBC for a long time too. So
looks like Steve, you've still got the shout outs going, but I wanted to say thank you for an incredible evening. Both Steve and I would like to thank the School of Communications and Information Dean Jonathan Potter, Amy Moore, the Professor and Chair of the Journalism and Media Studies program at Sky, Ashley Koutoupidis in the Alumni Relations Department, and Rob Beckles from the School of Communication Information. Rob, I think we're going to call on you to talk about Sky's upcoming programs and how people can contribute to the Sean Carr program. Hey, Rob.
Yep, Ashley, if you want to, there you go. So one upcoming event we have that I think people might find pretty interesting is on the life and legacy of the late John R. Lewis. It's with Sky and history professor David Greenberg. This is going to be on Thursday, October 8th, 2020 from 5 to 6 p.m. You can find out all about this event and many other events hosted by the Rutgers Alumni Association at alumni.rutgers.edu/getinvolved/events. I definitely suggest this one, though. It's going to be a great one. And Professor Greenberg is currently working on a biography of John Lewis.
Yeah, I'm going to ask.
If you're interested in receiving news from the School of Communication Information, you can visit our website, cominfo.rutgers.edu/newsletter. You opt in for the newsletter, and I think we do it about 4 times a year. And you can also receive the development newsletter, which we put out bi-monthly.
All right, Marty, I'm going to ask Ash if when everybody's done with this part of it, if Ashley could unmute everybody and let them all put their video on so we could have a class.
Yeah.
Seriously.
That would be great. I guess maybe Ashley, if you can, once we finish the official program, if we can still stay on the line, maybe you can stop the recording, but we can still stay on because I know so many people want to, speak with Steve. But for the program, thank you all so much for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, look out for an email that'll have a replay of tonight's webcast. You can share it with folks who maybe missed it tonight. And you also get a survey about tonight's webinar. The Rutgers University Alumni Association will be sponsoring other virtual events. They would love your feedback because we want to provide even more programming like this so that you can stay engaged with Rutgers. In the meantime, please do all stay safe. And Steve, I'm going to coin a phrase from a Mets broadcaster. Put it in the books.
Thanks, Howie.